Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to this comparison and walkthrough of the Osho Zen Tarot versus the Sacred She Tarot. So let me give you a little bit of context before we dive into the decks. I have had the Osho Zen Tarot since I was in my early 20s. It is a deck I feel like I know forwards and backwards. You may have seen my very deep dive on this deck. And so if you haven't, I will have that linked in the description box and or up in the cards for you because I go through this deck in depth. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was quite some time ago that I also compared it to the Rider-Waite-Smith. And in fact, let me just see. Okay, my Rider-Waite-Smith is not in order, but I think what I might do for this video is actually compare the Osho Zen, the Sacred She, and the Rider-Waite-Smith. So give me just one second. I'm going to put this deck in order. Okay, so I have my Rider-Waite-Smith in order. The Osho Zen Tarot we're going to be looking at for this is the Osho Zen Pocket Edition because this is the copy that I'm using, but I also do have a full-size copy. I actually have two. I have the one that I had since I was in my early 20s that I trimmed, that I'm not really happy with the trim, which is why I got the pocket. But then I also have another full-size that is currently in storage, but I do like to keep the full-size book. So we will take a quick look, though, at the pocket versus the full-size book just to see if there's any differences. But you can see, if I were to compare, actually before I do that, let me grab the Sacred She so we can see that too. There, so we have all three of the decks, so we're going to be looking at those. But then the format for the two books, the Osho Zen original and the Sacred She, are very similar. They're this landscape format to the book. So the Osho Zen format is set up so that on the left, you would have the card image and the sort of, I feel like the divination meaning here. And then on the right page, you'd have more of like, I would say like a meditation about that card. Now, I typically, when working with this deck, refer mostly to the commentary, and I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe the commentary is written by the artist Mahadeva Padma, who also created the Sacred She Tarot. So when you look at the Sacred She Tarot, the format is just all one sort of divination meaning, and then there's this extra, there's still like a little bit of a, I guess like a lesson, or like a little bit more of a organic thought process about that card. Whereas if you just read the rest of it, it's more like the meaning of the card, right? So that's one major difference as far as the book is concerned, but they're pretty similar in tone, if I'm being completely honest. And then when we're comparing the cards, let's talk about the actual format. Now, again, this is the pocket. The standard size Osho Zen, again, it's in storage, so I don't, like, it's literally in a bin, like, tucked up in my closet, so I didn't go grab it. But this deck is this kind of a shape, just typically a little larger. So, yeah. That's the format. And then these are the backs of the Osho Zen. And these are the backs of the Sacred She. Now, I think the premise of the Sacred She is to tap into more of the feminine, but let's actually just read if it says anything on the back. Let's see. Okay, so here's some blurbs just to kind of set the tone. So from the introduction of the Osho Zen Tarot guidebook, we have this blurb that says, Osho Zen Tarot is definitely not a traditional tarot in the sense that you play with prediction. I have thoughts on that, but just a moment. Rather, it is a transcendental game of Zen which mirrors the moment, unwaveringly presenting what is here now without judgment or comparison. This game is a wake-up call to tune into sensitivity, intuition, compassion, receptivity, courage, and individuality. The focus on awareness is one of the main innovations to the old systems and thinking of the tarot that will soon become obvious to experienced users as they begin to work with the Osho Zen Tarot. So it was designed to be, I think, more Zen-based, more meditative, more present moment focused. The Sacred She Tarot is, so this is the bit from Mahadeva Padma, says, the 78 artworks comprising the Sacred She Tarot have arisen from observations within my own life and more broadly from the state of humanity in the 21st century. Our unconsciousness regarding the choices we make every day in dealing with each other and our impact on planet Earth has reached a tipping point. What is clear is that failing to appreciate the vital role each of us plays in a much bigger picture has created stresses and fractures within ourselves, our societies, and the entire planet. Now is the time for all of us to come to the table to bring whatever we have to offer or to show up and be fully present. The voice speaking through this work resounds in many tongues across oceans and continents between people of every age, color, gender, nationality, and belief. Without fail, the Sacred She points us toward the heart of being. She is within everyone. And it also speaks in the beginning here to this coming about, where is it here? The timing is right for the Sacred She Tarot to offer soulful nourishment and clarity as we transition out of an exhausted old world order burdened under the weight of young or male dominance. The Sacred She aims to help right that imbalance by illuminating a path towards self-respect, joy, and inner peace, no matter your gender. So the idea, I think, with the Sacred She is to tap into more of that yin style energy, that quieter, more inner reflective energy, which I think the Osho Zen Tarot also did really beautifully. So it'll be interesting to see how the two compare sort of energetically when like looking at the cards. For this comparison walkthrough, I don't plan to dip into the guidebooks too much, although I may dip into, I know Osho Zen really well, but I may dip into the Sacred She here and there if I get stuck or if I want to understand the perspective on a card. Real quick, because I said I was going to do this, let's take a look quickly at the full-size Osho Zen guidebook versus the pocket size. I was pretty impressed with the pocket size guidebook at first glance. It appears to have all the same information in the card entries, just no thumbnails of the cards, but let's take a look at a sample one. So here we have Slowing Down. This is the Knight of Pentacles, or the Knight of the Earthly Suit. Let's see if we can find it here. Okay, here we go. So the commentary looks like it is the same exactly. And this bit here, this is the same. Then what will be the quality? Yes, yes, yes. And then After a Long Walk, and then the essences. Okay, so yeah, it's the exact same card entry. You're just missing the thumbnail images. Obviously, the layout is much more compact and the font is smaller. So you're getting the exact same information in the little pocket that you get in the full size. So really convenient little package. Love that we're not missing the stories. One personal note about my use of the Osho Zen, I do not work with the extra bonus card, which is called the Master, because I don't have any sort of personal connection with Osho himself. I'm interested in the setup of the cards, which I think is brilliantly done, and the usability of it as a tool, as a deck, not in associating myself with any specific belief structure. Okay, so there's that to point out. And then, of course, the deck is going to be smaller, but I'll zoom us in a bit, and we'll like literally compare through the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Sacred She. I suspect of these three, the Sacred She is going to be almost feel the most unique in its structure, but we'll talk about that as we go through. All right, so we begin with the Fool, and I feel like the Osho Zen definitely mirrors the Rider-Waite-Smith quite a bit. We still have a character with the white flower in their hand. They don't seem to have a guide in the form of a little dog or another creature, but otherwise these two are pointed in a similar direction. They have a similar body posture, and they're both at a cliff edge. I've always enjoyed how the Osho Zen, he's actually like literally off the edge of the cliff, almost like he's dancing on the side of it, but those are very similar. When we look at beginning from the Sacred She, we get this feeling of actually being up above the universe. We see stars down here, then clouds, and then this winged character with a flower in her hair. So I feel we get the same idea of freedom and exploration, but it definitely has a completely different vibe. So I said I wasn't going to do this with the guidebook much, but I do want to sort of get a feeling for the premise. Beginning initiates a vibrant journey of transformation that requires openness and a mighty leap of faith. Let's see. Fueled by a longing to grow and experience, she trusts in existence to guide her flight into the unknown. And then it goes on from there. So we're talking about somebody who's taken flight into the unknown, who's being guided by spirit into the unknown, which is very cool. So we're already starting off with a more, I would say, spiritual vibe, or yeah. And we'll talk about cardstock and stuff like that at the end if I remember. Okay, so next we have the Magician. And these are all very, very different. So of course we have our traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. I would say actually composition-wise, Alchemy reminds me a little bit more of the Magician in the sense that we have a representation of the four elements. We see air, water, fire, and the earth here. And we also have a posture that sort of speaks to the as above, so below that we're used to seeing in the Rider-Waite-Smith, whereas the Osho Zen speaks about existence and representing your place in a larger universe, recognizing the ability to manifest is still there, but it's represented much differently. Alchemy is a keyword I would typically associate with temperance. And so this is actually a sticking point for me, and I'm going to go back to the guidebook and just see what the premise here is. So in this case, the alchemist stands poised, ready for action, and balanced within the cardinal elements at the intersection of heaven and earth. Now that beginning definitely ties deeply into the Rider-Waite-Smith. Here it describes this character as an innovative conduit who works with the forces of nature. Her aim is to understand the fundamentals of things and to use that knowledge to affect positive change. So it definitely does work. It's interesting because, again, when I think alchemy, I think of temperance, but it does work in this context. Next, we have our High Priestess. These two have a lot of similarity, as you can see, and all three of these feel like they very much are High Priestess energy. In this one, we have inner voice, and we have that idea of tuning within that comes through pretty strongly. In the Unknowable, we have that same sort of sense of the crescent moon here, the crescent moon here. The tones of this card take me into that place of the third eye that I think that all three of these cards bring one's attention to. So I think that those feel very aligned. So all of these also work very well for the Empress. We have creativity, which speaks to the more creation and nurturing aspect, I think, of the Empress, in the sense of like nurturing possibility, nurturing creativity, nurturing creations. Whereas Mother Nature here taps us more into the earthly, Mother Gaia sort of energy. And all of these feel very Empressy to me. I've got to admit, I really love order in the Sacred She. This feels like divine order. We see this sense of like cosmic order coming through in this card. It feels much more attached to that big energy that the Emperor contains. Like these two feel very much like they hold divinity within their representations. But the Rebel is a very powerful card in the Osho Zen and something that I love referencing. But to me, it's about like breaking the chains, going your own way, recognizing that you're in charge of your life. There's a lot of power and potency. And as an emperor, these both look very emperor-y, but all of these work really well for the Emperor, I think. All right. For the Hierophant, obviously the one that goes the most out of the box is the Osho Zen, which is not uncommon for this deck. This is no-thingness. There's a whole story here about the space between breaths, where the wisdom lies in the potential of things. It speaks to the unknowable, but also speaks to the idea that when we come to the place where we recognize the wisdom in the gap, we get a lot of power in that. It's very, very potent. It takes us very far away from traditional Hierophant interpretation, but it's a really powerful card when it comes up in a reading, and I'm a huge fan of it. But it doesn't make me think Hierophant when I pull it, actually. But then I'll leave that here. And then over here we have the Wisdom Keeper. Again, I feel like we're tapping into big energy with the Sacred She. It very much feels like we're tapping into somebody with deep knowledge, and it feels less dogmatic by far than the RWS. This is a card in the Sacred She that I'm not fond of, but I'll explain that. These both feel like they very much are traditional lovers cards. They sort of speak to that big cosmic lovers energy. This one, unfortunately, because of the picture, it makes me think of the Twin Flame, which I feel like it can be a really problematic concept in the divination community, in people that get readings and such. I think it can take people into some pretty unhealthy places at times. And so I look at this and I'm like, oh, I wish it wasn't looking like that. But if we take the context, or I guess the subtext of the idea of the Twin Flame off of the table for a second and take it at face value, the idea of two flames joining, neither taking away from the other, is still a very powerful understanding of the Lovers card, and it does work. I just have to kind of do a little bit of mental gymnastics to get away from what it first brings to mind for me. All right, then we have the Chariot. These are all super different. So of course, awareness in the Osho Zen is a far cry from the traditional Chariot idea. Awareness is that sort of burning away of illusion, the burning away of Maya that opens you up to possibility and allows you to focus on truth and move in that direction. Turning point is never how I would have described the Chariot card. And so I'm super interested to see what she says here about this card in the guidebook, because let's see. The turning point represents a quantum shift that brings clarity by revealing what just moments before was held up by uncertainty, confusion, and doubt. So it's really locked into that Osho Zen interpretation of this card. Don't waste the inspiration gained at this supportive time by retreating into an old mindset that's kept you wandering in the dark until now. This dramatic shift of energies is as natural as winter's contraction evolving into the colorful expansiveness of spring. As tensions subside, you'll feel uplifted, as though returning home after a long absence. Enjoy this boost in confidence, but take care not to waste its support. Use this turning point to strengthen yourself while expanding your horizons. There's so much more to be discovered. So to me, it's like the deeper layer. What's going on underneath the Chariot that allows us to move forward? Well, it's having a focus and a clear direction, and we can only have that clear direction if we've burned away the illusion. So it works. It just takes a little bit of energy. Now, I will point out, one of the things about the layout of both the Osho Zen and the Sacred She is that neither anywhere on the cards references the titles of the traditional tarot. You won't see the Chariot or Death or the Tower referenced on these cards or these cards. It's one of the things that I think actually makes them really powerful, because it forces us, it kind of gives us that extra second to, if we want to make the link to the RWS, we can. But if we don't take that next step, we're actually beginning from a place of a more organic understanding of the energy of the card, and not beginning from a place of rote understanding of what the chariot means. We're thinking about, what does awareness mean? What does the turning point mean? And we're reading it that way. And in that way, reading with the Osho Zen has always felt a little bit like accessible, because you can read it from the context of almost like you're reading an oracle deck, where you just jump off of the keyword in the artwork and you just let your mind wander. I think you can do the same thing with the sacred she, and I think that that should not be underestimated, how powerful that can be. All right, now we have, this is my favorite strength card ever. It literally makes me think of little baby Danny. That's what I think of when I see this card. I can't help it. I'm not even sure if that is that might be a crocodile, not an alligator. I'm not good at identifying them. I have to see if it says in here. It just says fearsome denizen from the primordial depths. And with the lotus in her hair, I mean, this is such a beautiful card. I'm going to read this. Okay, and we're just going to end up, it's going to end up being a bit of a deep dive into sacred she and revisiting of the Osho Zen, but let me read this. The fearsome denizen from the primordial depths symbolizes our shadow side, the untamed aspect of our nature we are taught to suppress. Yet childlike innocence embraces the menacing entity with kindness and full acceptance as it would a long-lost friend. By acknowledging this unnerving characteristic of our own nature, it is reassured and calmed, becoming a supportive ally rather than one that wreaks havoc. When the murky fear of uncertainty and trusting openness merge, their union produces compassion. Without the mud, there can be no flowering. That's a reference to the lotus. This card epitomizes the result of an inner alchemy that occurs when our radiant inner child and dreaded elemental nature finally work in tandem. Coaxing the shadow self toward consciousness requires calm determination, open-mindedness, humility, and patience. This is so powerful. As shocking passions from the past surface, they must be acknowledged and explored with honesty, unwavering integrity, acceptance, and ultimately forgiveness. Once we stop condemning and suppressing our awkward, uncouth traits, they finally transform into tolerance and empathy. Greeting this resident from your inner swamp can be a profound reunion that creates wholeness and is the key to transformation. That is so incredible, because that is specifically how I view the strength card. I don't view this as facing fear necessarily. I specifically view it as taming the inner wild, taming one's own shadow. One of the reasons I love the Mons Tarot strength card so much, I've got a print hanging on my wall, is because the Mons Tarot shows a monster creating this little beastie that's looking up at her with like love in its eyes. But like that little beastie is what we're taming, and it's that beastie that comes from within. And that is so beautifully represented in the way this card is described, and the lotus just brings that message home. It's really powerful. The courage card has always been one of my favorites in the Osho Zen, because it speaks about how when you are determined to move into the light, you can do it no matter what. You can face unending obstacles and darkness and still find your way to the light. And it speaks about how flowers, like think about weed flowers even, when faced with a concrete walkway, can still find their way up through. They'll even burst the concrete apart with, you know, the help of other parts of nature, of course, but to spring forward even through the most like tough obstacles. So this has always been a really powerful card for me, but I love this as well so much. And we're going to be here forever, just so y'all know. It's going to be a long one. So here we have the Hermit, and all three of these feel very hermit in their energy. I've always loved aloneness and the way that it speaks to the concept of embracing, not like the difference between being alone and being lonely, and the benefits and power of being alone. And so all of these, I think, speak to that. Solitude does as well. There's actually a chapter in my book that is very much inspired by this specific card. By book, I mean The Self-Worth Path, my first book. My other book is coming out in October. All right, so then we have Solitude. Beautiful. This mental image of change of the Wheel of Fortune is literally locked down in my brain every single time I see any Wheel of Fortune card. So this is very much embedded in my personal gnosis, I guess you could say, of the tarot. And I think it's much more effective as a card than the traditional RWS. I think a lot of the Osho Zen is more effective at face value than the imagery of the Rider-Waite-Smith. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but that's where I sit. Anyway, I feel like both of these are locked in. They both have the same keyword, which I adore, because I think it's really powerful to use that keyword for the Wheel of Fortune. The one difference I would say between the Sacred She and the Osho Zen that's really jumping out at me is, in this case, it feels like this cosmic energy that you're sort of caught up in. In this one, you're holding the sort of energy of change in your hands. You're harmonizing with it. It's a part of you. So I think there's a little more empowerment in this one, but I think they're both equally good. All right, very, very different cards for justice. I think that balancing is a really powerful way to look at justice. I also think it speaks a little bit to the Thoth and the Thoth's idea of looking at this card as adjustment rather than justice. I see a little bit of that in this, making those micro adjustments to balance things out. And I think there's some speaking here to, in this card, more to sort of karmic balancing and like balancing areas of your life, but it does have a very temperance vibe. Again, we're seeing another card that reminds me of temperance, but if I take it at its face, it's like we're balancing air and earth, fire and water, sun and moon. And there's this harmony up here when we balance it, but I also see all the chakras are activated and balanced, which is beautiful. There's a lot to dig into in this image and I really like it, but it's a little less concrete for me than Breakthrough, which is such a powerful card. For me, the Justice card is very much about understanding that the effects of your own actions, the consequences of your own behavior, that kind of thing. There's a sense of accountability to the card that I really appreciate. And I think Breakthrough really makes justice more than it is, if that makes sense. It gives us the idea of what we can do when we have that information, or when we do that, when we learn to take accountability, when we learn to be present and relate or link behavior to events in our life. I think that can really be powerful. So I think Breakthrough is amazing. It's a powerful card, but balancing works. It's just probably of these two, the Osho Zen would win. These both have a very similar vibe, but this brings us into the Hanged Man more effectively than New Vision does. When I was first getting to know this deck, this was one of the cards that always kind of hung me up. I understood what it was trying to do, but what it was trying to do reminds me more of Judgment. New Vision is about sort of the evolution, like sort of learning and becoming more of yourself through understanding, right? So the insight that comes from self-reflection and personal growth and all of that kind of thing. And that is a big piece of the Hanged Man, right? You have this opportunity to learn, to be offered a new perspective, to get new insight about your life. And I feel like these all send that message. With the Hanged Man, we see it with the glow around his head in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. In New Vision, we see it up here with the way that this person is sort of coming out of this sort of sluggish, going through the motions and actually starting to wake up to more of what's going on. And I realized as I said it that way, that makes sense why this is called waking up. But we do have the bat upside down. So we get the reminder about a different perspective. And I think that's really great. Okay. All of these are powerful representations of death, of course. I've always been a big fan of transformation. I love how this figure is gently placing its hand on the mouth of this figure, like sort of enacting the process of death. It's really quite powerful, I think. But transitioning here is also really beautiful. We see the cycle of life and death here with the birth and the skull and death down here. And we see this cycle is never ending, right? I think they're both really, really beautiful representations of the energy of the card. So here we have the actual Temperance card. And I almost feel as though Karma could have sat in Justice's position and in balancing. Let's just take a look at those cards real quick. So this is Justice and this is Temperance. And I feel like these two should have been swapped, in all honesty. And I will probably, if I'm reading with this deck, I'll probably read it at face value and end up sort of reading these the way that I would have read. I'll read this the way that I would have read Justice, and I'll read this the way that I would have read Temperance, if that makes any sense. So both energies are in the deck. They're just in different positions, which is a little bit annoying, but I do get that the energies are there and present. It's just something that's like, but like here, if you look at these two, you can actually see how similar these two cards are. And it almost makes me wonder, like, look at the composition, look at the rainbows, look at the yin-yang symbol, look at all of it. Like, these literally feel like they're meant to be connected to one another, and it almost makes me wonder if it was a mistake. Does that make sense? Because it's so similar to this card. But it is what it is. I'm going to just take it at face value. But it's just, it's an obnoxious thing to me. Because while Karma, I can make a case for this being Temperance, it doesn't feel like Temperance to me. This feels like Justice. So that's an annoying thing. Integration, this has always felt very temperance-y. In fact, this card is probably why I have a strong understanding of temperance, because I think that this card explained the concepts of temperance really well, both in its artwork and in the guidebook. So that brings us to the Devil. And I've always, I mean, I'm going to say this every single card, I've always really loved conditioning for the Devil. It just speaks to the way that we can find ourselves living a life that we didn't necessarily choose, but that we kind of chose through our actions. We can end up being far away from who we actually are because we're trying so hard to fit in. And the same thing is visible here in repression, right? We see this idea of like repressed desire, repressed authenticity. The Devil always takes us far away from who we truly are. And all of these cards, I feel like, represent that pretty beautifully. This one gives us more of that sort of trapped feeling, though, which I like. I mean, all three have trapped us, but in different ways. All of these are really good. This feels very, very towery. I've never had an issue reading this as the Tower. They all have the lightning, which is amazing. In this case, it looks like the lightning is striking a cup of coffee or tea and like making it boil over, which is so interesting to me. But this is Crisis, and I think Crisis works well for the Tower. This one the most, I think, because it has this brightly lit up star right at the center of like the third eye space. And that sort of immediately makes sense to me. We have the third eye space illuminated in the Osho Zen too, but it's illuminated with a moon, which this is a representation of the star card. So that's always thrown me a little bit. It feels very moon-like, this image. And here we really see it. It's also worth noting that even though it's the third eye that is the focus, the throat chakra is also lit up with a little star symbol. So I think that's really cool. All right, then we have the moon. This is very, I think the way that I would typically read the moon is often in shadows, jumping at shadows, anxiety. Past lives has always been a bit ambiguous, I feel like, but it's a powerful card. It's just, it doesn't always make me think of the moon. When I really start to dig into it, it does, because it speaks to the things that sort of link us to the past, to our subconscious, the things that carry forward. There's a lot you can dig into with this card, but this feels immediately more accessible. So that's nice. I love innocence in the Osho Zen. I love joy as well. This is really cute. All of these to me convey the same idea. There's this, oh, look here, there's the Rider-Waite-Smith sun in the back of that card. Okay, that's really cool. I didn't know that that was there. That's amazing. I love that. So this is, for me, the sun is about being safe enough to be yourself and to really come back to a place of like unobscured joy, but also like shameless joy, you know, not being in a place where you're worried about what anybody else thinks. You're just in it, right? Love that. I think liberation works really well for judgment. I think beyond illusion is also very, very powerful. I think this is a little more immediately understandable, but they're both really good. I've always loved completion. This is another mental image that whenever I think of the world, I think of that last puzzle piece falling into place because of this image. I've always loved that depiction. It's really, really smart. And here, if we look closely, we're up into the eye of a whale. And it's really, really beautiful and powerful. But I think it speaks to what happens when we get to the end of this archetypal journey, or at least one cycle in our archetypal journey through the Tarot Major Arcana. So let me pull the majors out of the way, just to keep things a little bit more organized for myself here. And then let's look at the, oh, I forgot that one. Let's look at the fire suit. So I think in this case, both the Osho Zen, the Sacred She, and the Rider-Waite-Smith all give the idea of the Ace of Wands, but frankly, these two are much easier. They feel very tapped into the elemental energy of the card. The inspiration is even more powerful, I think, than source. This is probably a good time to talk about the structural differences between the three decks. So let's talk about that real quick. With the Rider-Waite-Smith, as you may know, through the majors, you have titles on all of the cards. And then you also have titles on the aces and the court cards. But then when you get into the minor arcana, you just have the number, at least in the version of the Rider-Waite-Smith that I have. In the Osho Zen Tarot, the majors, all of the cards have a single keyword or phrase on it that immediately tells you what the meaning of the card is. But then you have this little diamond in the center. So the purple diamond is majors. The red diamond is the fire suit. The blue diamond is the water suit. The gray diamond is the suit of the mind, or the cloud, the cloud suit. And then the rainbow diamond is actually the suit of earth, and it is the equivalent to the pentacles. So then you have the number, the associated number. So the aces are unnumbered. I will say that in this pocket version, there is a typo, a mistake on the king of air, or king of clouds, I should say. He has no number. Control is the king of clouds. It should have had an up arrow. So the way that the quartz are in the Osho Zen, real quick, right facing arrows are pages, left facing arrows are knights, downward facing arrows are queens, and upward facing arrows are kings, but that is missing in the pocket version. He's missing his up arrow. So that's a little bit annoying. I don't know if they'll fix that on a future print. I know this deck well enough that it's not an issue for me, but I wanted to point that out because the structure is different. Now with the Sacred She, the way that these go is that the majors all have the major arcana number and a keyword. And then the minors have just a number from ace through 14. So there is no quartz in the sense that we just have 11 for the page, 12 for the knight, 13 for the queen, and 14 for the king, right? So there's no king, queen, page language in this deck at all, which can be really powerful, particularly if you want a deck that is not at all gendered as far as that goes. That would be perhaps helpful, or if you want to get away from those traditional titles, that's just something good to know. Okay. Ace of Fire, love it from all of these. I love the word inspiration for the Ace of Fire. That's how I view that card. Always been a big fan. I gotta stop saying it that way. Possibilities is great. I love the way it encourages you to sort of zoom out, look at the big picture, look at all the possibilities in front of you rather than just a narrow focus. This actually is almost the opposite, but it's still part of the energy of the Two of Wands, right? You're looking at all of the possibilities, but then you're going to narrow your focus and pick a route. You're going to pick a next step. So this card is very much about consideration, possibilities, planning, and perspective to a degree. So that they all work. This is another one that takes a minute to sort of get to know, and I don't think it has a whole lot of connection to the traditional way I might see the Three of Wands, but it's a powerful card nonetheless. I think this is, for me, a lot about being in the moment and enjoying the journey. Here we have refresh. This is interesting. I want to see what she says about this. So let's take a look at the Three of Fire. So she says, renewal is a natural process that happens around and within us with every breath we take. However, over time, we develop an outer shell, a mask of affectation meant to protect us from the trials of life. Identification with that mask can harden us at the expense of staying in touch with our innately trusting nature. In fact, fresh beginnings are available throughout all the days of our lives. That untarnished presence, our inner child, always remains available, but the refreshing outlook of innocence is often neglected or ignored and considered inappropriate or naive. We refresh our devices, but rarely do we refresh our thinking, preferring to stick with what is already known. Restoring contact with one's inner child begins by dropping the constant need to be on top of it and knowledgeable about absolutely everything, including what lies ahead. A restorative process is unleashed when we trust. We become responsive rather than reactive. It is a shift in awareness that is nothing less than a rebirth into wonder, and it is possible at any age. It can be a little scary. Once a seed shell breaks open, there's no turning back, and we grow as we imbibe the rich mulch of all our days and nights, trials and errors, successes and failures. Nobody is ever a finished product. That's really beautiful. Actually, I really like that. So this is really about, I think, like having a fresh outlook on life, taking that more inner child like approach rather than being just stuck in your ways, which does make sense for the Three of Wands because we're often venturing into new territory with that card, right? We're taking chances. These are all very different. Actually, I would say that Dance and the Four of Wands really tie in beautifully together. For me, the Four of Wands is about a milestone, recognizing how far we've come. We still have further to go, but we can pause and celebrate our success so far, our progress so far. It feels very much like a noticing of progress. And so this really ties me into the Four of Wands in a beautiful way. The participation card to me, in a way, I often read it a lot more like I might read the Three of Pentacles. It's really about, if you look at this, this is a top-down view of four figures. Each of them is putting in and taking out equally from this mandala they're creating in the center. It's actually a really powerful card and has a lot to say about how to work with others, how to manage relationships in a balanced way, but it doesn't always tie me directly into sort of the RWS meaning of the Four of Wands, and I think the Sacred She does. Okay. This totally works. Competition is great for the Five of Wands as a keyword, so I really like the way that this is done. I like the butting heads energy of the two kites, which is great. The totality card to me is more about focus and trust, but it's really a great card to talk to and dive into in a reading. It's really great, but it doesn't tie into that competitive energy we normally see in the Five of Wands, so this brings us a little closer to the Rider-Waite-Smith, I think. Here we have very, very similar energies. I love that we've got streamers in both the Osho Zen and the Sacred She. You can really see the evolution of this artist's perspectives on the cards too as you go through, which is really cool. But those all are very Six of Wands. This is a much more positive take on the Seven of Wands. So here, this is a very, very visceral image of what it feels like to be in a Seven of Wands place. But the adaptability, even though the environment is harsh, this fox is learning to work with their environment, use it to their advantage, rather than just letting it beat them down. So really powerful image. Ooh, these are all very different. Okay, so traveling doesn't necessarily feel like it has the intensity that I normally get when I read the traditional Eight of Wands, but it's a powerful card. I get a lot from it. It's really a zoomed out perspective on the journey in general. But here we have self-confidence. Jumping through these like rings of fire to reach for this key. We're so focused that we're gonna, we're really in the zone, I guess. And that really speaks to the Eight of Wands to me. Ooh. Okay, we really get the stubbornness of the Nine of Wands in the Resistance card. And in the Exhaustion card, we get like the most intense way to think about what it feels like to be in a Nine of Wands place. The Resistance is like not giving up, standing here, I'm immovable, I'm an immovable object. And that's true of all three of these, but it takes us a little away from the intense discomfort of the card here. It's still uncomfortable, but it's not as viscerally like, oh my God, you gotta shift something, right? So really different takes, but they all work. And then all of these give the vibe of the Ten of Wands. The suppression, the being weighed down, bogged down, overload, holding this giant, like, flaming boulder, it looks like. All of these are very Ten of Wands. Okay, now we're into the Page of Wands energy. I love playfulness as a keyword for the Page of Wands, but I really love self-expression. I think that's really powerful. There's a freedom to the Page of Wands that we don't see in many other court cards, like a real, like, open to everything kind of vibe. And we get that here, and I love it. I love that image. Intensity, intention. These are both good. They both feel very focused and they both feel very driven, which works for the Knight of Wands for me. This actually is really interesting because I haven't, you know, really compared this to the RWS since I made that last video. But this actually, this particular queen has a lot more of a Queen of Pentacles feel to me when I look at her. She's like, here, have some food, which is exactly how I think of the Queen of Pentacles. And now that I see her specifically next to the Rider-Waite-Smith, I'm like, wait, that's wrong. That's so funny, but like she reads fine when I'm reading with just the Osho Zen, but that's a discordant card for me. Whereas here, spontaneity, I think this energy, this vibe for the Queen of Fire works very, very, very well. So love all of these, but interesting. And then we have King of Wands energy. This is very nebulous and ambiguous. I think it's a little harder to read with at first glance, but integrity and this dude with his daughter, like this is so powerful. This literally reminds me, I don't know if you've seen on TikTok or on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Shorts or whatever, there is a guy, there was a video that I'm sure it must have gone viral because I feel like I've seen it and versions of it in various places, but he's obviously taught his little girl to say affirmations to herself in the mirror. And so she stands in front of the mirror and she's like, I'm powerful and I am strong and I can do whatever I put my mind to, that kind of thing. And it's the most heartwarming, amazing thing. This guy and this little girl literally remind me of that video. And I think that's so powerful for the King of Fire. I think that's fabulous. I love this energy. I think this is much more relatable than this one is, but this one is nice because you really see, I'll just show you what I get out of this. You see that the king has mastered the energy. So he's literally got source in his hands and is holding it and controlling it. It's really powerful and it works really well in the Osho Zen, but this is so much more like immediately relatable. All right, let me get the fire cards out of the way and we'll move on to water. Okay, I love going with the flow for the Ace of Water so much, but I also really love both of these. We obviously have maintained that keyword flow for the Ace of Water in the Sacred She, which is great. I prefer these over the RWS, but I prefer all of these pretty much for the most part over the RWS. Okay. I'm a huge, huge fan of this card. This particular depiction of the Two of Cups is something that I regularly reference in readings, no matter what deck I'm using, because it's such a beautiful way to illustrate the idea that both of these trees are their own tree, but where they overlap, so this is a pink tree, this is a yellow tree, but where they overlap, they create this orange color. So they create something new together. And I think that's a really great depiction of a healthy relationship, no matter what type of relationship it is. I've always really loved this. And because of this, I really look for in Two of Cups cards a sign that nobody's above the other. They're both holding things at the same heart level. There's no imbalance between the two characters. That's important to me because of this card. And then, oh, I took them away before I was done comparing. Okay, sorry. And then we have union. We have the same equality here that I would look for. This is beautiful. It definitely has people instead of trees, which could make it more relatable when you're pulling it out in a reading, but I'm still such a fan of this that, you know, that one's my favorite, obviously. Okay, these are also great, but harmony is, it's less, these two feel very on par with one another as far as their depiction. One of the specific things I look for in a Three of Cups card is some symbol, some sign, some representation that each character is different. They're not homogenous. They're each bringing something different to the table. So here they have 3 different colored dresses. Here they have 3 different outfits, but they also have 3 different colored hair. In any Three of Cups card, that's the first thing I look for. And here, they've actually sort of become more homogenous, right? We have 3 dolphins leaping through out of the water, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it shows about how everybody's on the same wavelength, but we're missing that individuality, or I'm missing the individuality between the 3 dolphins. It's interesting because there's another card in the Osho Zen that depicts this idea of being frozen, so it's interesting to see it here, but I think this is a really appropriate place for it. When we're in a Four of Cups place, we're very stuck. We're very like bogged down and not necessarily seeing the good around us. Here, it's very much about like tuning out everybody else's voices, inner critic. It's about tuning out other people's opinions and just kind of coming to your own center. And I think it's a powerful image for sure. Here we have this feeling of like, I'm curious. I mean, I can make a case for Frozen here, but I want to see what she says in the guidebook. So let's take a look. Oh, her guidebook's in a different order. She goes to swords and the air and then water. Okay, anyway. So she says, worry about the future freezes the life out of life. Okay, that's completely perfect. If we're trying to like, it's kind of that whole idea of the grass is greener where you water it, not so much on the other side. You know, it's like, where are you putting your focus? Where are you putting your attention? Here, if you're spending so much time thinking about the future, you sort of lock yourself out of being present in the present, which is definitely something that is happening in the Four of Cups and the Rider-Waite-Smith, right? We're like halfway and we're already almost an hour. So I did warn you, it's going to be a long one. Okay. So she says a kind of mental paralysis sets in where you only see worst case scenarios, and who in their right mind wants to remain stuck in that? Disengaging from a standstill requires awareness of how you got stuck, feeling somehow not enough or victimized in the first place. A little self-inquiry is the means for melting an impasse created by self-doubt and dispersing the mindset that constructed it. What have you been hoping for that hasn't come to pass? Did a buildup of frustration or disappointment cause you to withdraw, give up, or turn your back on opportunities? Giving life the cold shoulder may have been an understandable tactic at one point, but continued frigidity only attracts more frost. Hardening the heart to protect against pain feels safe, but comes at the expense of your vitality and enjoyment of life. Oh my God, it goes on from there. These are really beautiful entries in the guidebook, I've got to say. But I've always loved Ma Padma's writing. She also has the Tao Oracle, which is a longtime favorite of mine as well. All right. Okay. So interesting. Here's another discordant spot for me. This is typically how I would view the Six of Cups, is clinging to the past. It's interesting because, again, when I read this, it's usually shuffled up. I'm pulling cards. I'm not thinking about the RWS when I'm working with the Osho Zen, typically. And it's funny because, yes, all of these, I mean, clinging to the past is also something that's happening when we're grieving in the Five of Cups, when we're sad, when we're bummed, when we're disappointed, as we see here. I think all of these do give the vibe, but they're very, very different. This feels like the shadow side of the Six of Cups, but it's a powerful card. She's got her head in her box of memories, and she's so caught up in those that she's not seeing all the good, the big, giant, shining cup behind her. Here, we have that grief and disappointment and the sort of being stuck in it. It's much more reminiscent of the Five of Cups, I think. In the Rider-Waite-Smith, I mean. So this is definitely a far cry from the reminiscing and innocence of the Six of Cups in the Rider-Waite-Smith. And so is this. These are all very, very different energies. So in the Rider-Waite-Smith, we often have this thing we're doing where we're idolizing the past, where we're making the past our idyllic dream. Here, we're often fantasizing about what we wish our life was like rather than being present. These are both about being sort of distracted from daily life. You're not in the present because you're stuck somewhere else. But this is future focused, which is typically how I view the Seven of Cups, ironically. Now I'm trying to remember. Okay, yeah, this is where we get a little strayed away from the RWS and the Osho Zen. But you can form a link there, but to me this links more to the Seven of Cups in its interpretation than it does the Six of Cups. But anyways, let's see what she has to say about passion, because I was not expecting that in this spot especially. So let's see if we can make a link to the RWS. Passion is never neutral. It either offers unimaginable heights or sucks the life out of you, drains you dry, and leaves you searching for more. When a have it or be had passion takes over, reason is cast out to sea. Hungry for gratification, desire tosses caution aside and demands satisfaction. At that point of no return, it's impossible to rein it in, let alone stop it. What role has passion played in your life? How far have you gone to satisfy desire? Would you go there today? Surfacing from a passionate obsession is disorienting, as though a tidal wave has swept through, leaving debris scattered across what was your life. This is so interesting, because this is kind of how I can view sometimes the vibe of that sort of twin flame energy. And now I'm so curious what she says about the Lovers, and I probably should have looked there first. So we're going to just take a quick break, see what she says about the Lovers, because I went to that place with it, and now I'm really curious. Love is love. Love is not this. Love is not complicated or cruel. Love is not blind or dumb. Love is not abusive. Love is not demanding or controlling. Love is not a test or a problem. Love is not political, greedy, or stingy. Love is not possessive, impatient, or wishy-washy. Love wants not, needs not. Love holds no grudges, stakes no claim, has no boundary, no face, no gender, color, or creed. Just as sunlight dances over water or silently enters a darkened room, illuminating all that it touches, so does love gently glow from within, brightening all. Love's radiance loses nothing, yet the more it is felt, the more it increases. So that's a beautiful way to look at this card, is that when the flames join, they become bigger. Neither one becomes smaller, which is really powerful, actually. So it says, just as a solitary flame is undimmed by lighting 1,000 candles, each of us is a conduit for love in that way. We can illuminate, nourish, and support the world. That's really beautiful, actually. That really helps with that card. I just realized that, given how much I'm loving her entries, I realized I should have looked that one up when we got there. Okay. Anyways, back to these cards. So the Passion card here, again, it's not trying to be the Rider-Waite-Smith necessarily. I'm just comparing it for the sake of the conversation and the deep dive. But I feel like all three of these give me very different meanings and interpretations. So here we definitely have a card that brings us directly into the Rider-Waite-Smith. In this case, it's what hat you're going to wear. There's a cowboy hat, a chef's hat, a Mickey Mouse hat, a king's hat, a Viking hat, a jester's hat, and a halo. Really cool way to depict that energy. The projections card in the Osho Zen is much more about the faces we put on and the ways that keeps us from connecting in a genuine way. It's a powerful card, but it doesn't have a lot of a direct link to the RWS. So I think this is really well done. I also really like the keyword. Letting go and separation. These are very interesting ways to look at the Eight of Cups. This is such a beautiful healing image. This one's a lot tougher, but the Eight of Cups can be a tough card. I don't think it's intended to be easy. Letting go encourages us to find the ease in it, but in reality, it's tough. It's tough energy a lot of times to be in, regardless. So I like this. I think this makes sense. So I don't know how to feel about this, but I think that both of these definitely, I mean, really all three of them do speak to, okay, here's my issue. Let's see if I can articulate. So for me, the Nine of Cups is a card about finding contentment within yourself. You don't have to get it from outside of yourself. And yet, oddly, the RWS doesn't show it that way. It shows somebody who's content because they've got all these wine cups, right? These cups behind them that represent all this, whatever, the things and feelings and experiences they've accumulated. I can find and express my meaning in this card if I try, but it's not easeful. It's not like right there. Whereas the Nine of Water in the Osho Zen is really about being so comfortable and so content that you, like, the floor falls out from underneath you because you're taking it for granted to a degree. So to me, it's a reminder to be grateful. The Indulgence card, this feels more like Nine of Pentacles to me. It feels very tangible, right? It looks like cake and like literally treating yourself, which is kind of more like Nine of Pentacles energy to me. So I'm curious what she says about it. Maybe it will help. Let's see. Abundance can be intoxicating. See, this is frustrating. I see this in so many decks where the Nine of Water, which this is the realm of emotion. It's abundance of emotion, of good feelings, of happiness. In the Nine of Pentacles, it's about like physical abundance, like material abundance. But that's not really the point here. This really does talk about the abundance of success and material indulgence without restraint. You can have your cake and eat it with abandon. But, you know, I don't like that. This is a card that actually, when I first got this deck, I was like, is this going to break the deck for me? Because the Nine of Cups is an important card for me. And I don't love this. I don't love this. I don't necessarily love this one either, to be fair. But, okay. 10 of Cups. Here's where we get gratitude. Now, the funny thing is I often speak to gratitude when I get the Nine of Cups, right? And also, actually, the Four of Cups. But anyway. Gratitude for all the good you have. I think this is much more relatable than harmony. Harmony is a beautiful energy to talk about, which actually, didn't we just see harmony in the Three of Cups? Interesting, and it was also dolphins. How funny is that? Interesting. It kind of makes me wonder if this was originally intended to be her 10 of Cups, especially with the rainbow. That's very interesting. Anyway, just things I'm thinking about. But I think gratitude works well for the 10 of Cups. Be grateful for those precious moments of bliss. They don't last forever. Trust for the Page of Cups is so great. I've always loved this. I also love how the colors tie directly into the Rider-Waite-Smith colors. Imagination also works very well for Page energy. So I like all of these. Voyager and Knight of Cups, love both of these so much. He's like sailing into the universe of stars. That's really, really pretty. Understanding is powerful, but it's about freeing yourself and seeking what you want without, letting imposed restrictions stop you. They all speak to Knight of Cups energy really well, but I love that Voyager card. That's beautiful. And then here we have Intuition. She looks like she could be a high priestess, except she's underwater, and she's so pretty. I love this. This is really powerful for the Queen of Cups. We do have a lot of intuition present in that card, and both these two really highlight that. And then we have our King of Cups. I love that we get the great dad vibes, because that's how I think of the King of Cups. I really see it here with the Dreamweaver. And then healing, it's powerful, but it's more ambiguous. So I really like the Sacred She King. And then we have the air suit. So let me pop these cards away. And there. All right, so love clarity. That's probably one of my favorite keywords for the Ace of Swords. So I love that it's present on this card. I love the diamond and the facets on it, and the way that gives us something to jump off of visually with the image. I think it's more powerful than consciousness as far as relatability. This is a very controversial card for good reason. There was better ways, better words that definitely could have been used to express this idea. It's a powerful idea and it's a powerful card, but it can be a lot for people. So I'm glad that that's not carrying through. We actually have restraint here, which is very interesting and a different vibe on the card for sure. These two mirror each other in composition quite a bit. We just have like a close-up view really of the Two of Swords. I like the impossible decision vibe of this card, though. The way that it's depicted, or the way that it's talked about in the book, is like if this character lets go of this cliff edge with their hands, it's a character. If they let go with their hands, they're going to fall, and they're going to fall head first. If they let go with their feet, they're still going to fall. They're going to fall feet first. And the way I like to think of this is, what if they let go with both at the same time, and it turns out they could fly? It's like thinking outside the box. It's one of the things I've always loved about this card, and it really helped me to gel my understanding of the Two of Swords and what it can mean in a reading. But it's, again, problematic word. Here we have restraint, which is interesting. To me, it's almost like holding yourself back from reacting. I'm just curious if that's what she talks about in the book. So let's go back to the air suit. Yeah. On one hand, restraint limits movement or action. On the other, it can bring relief as it sets up boundaries in order to redirect the flow of our energies into a more integrated and grounded path forward. So she talks about the need for boundaries. She talks about allowing possibility, knowing your bottom line, and whether or not restraints are being put on you from the outside or whether you're putting them in place. Interesting. Okay, I think that's good. Oops, let's get the book out of the way. All right, let's take a look at the Three of Swords. Oh, we went so traditional with heartbreak. I'm disappointed. But here's the thing. Yes, the Three of Swords does often talk about heartbreak, but it's talking more specifically about I think, this is just my opinion, about the mental processes and the reckoning we have to do with our emotional experiences. So when you have an emotional loss or a heartbreak, how do we process that? How do we learn from that? How do we grow from that? In the Osho Zen, the isolation card speaks to, it kind of reminded me of that Frozen card from earlier I was talking about, but it speaks to getting so locked up because of an emotional experience because you're not letting yourself actually feel it. So this is about really letting the emotion in and slowly melting that ice so that you can process and move forward, right? And it definitely would have informed the way that I view the Three of Swords. Love rest as a keyword here. I think that's beautiful. Postponement is great. I will say something to keep in mind. The Osho Zen clouds cards or air cards / swords cards are very, very much a lean into the negative. The sort of Zen meditation vibe of this deck really does highlight the way the mind can get in the way. And so it really looks to more of the shadowy side of all of these cards rather than the, you know, more positive side. So there's a bias, and I've talked about it before in the Osho Zen, but there's definitely a bias in the sword suit that has it lean even more negative than it normally does. So it's nice to see in the Sacred She that Mahadeva Padma has actually softened it and allowed for more of that neutral or positive interpretation. In postponement, we're seeing what happens when we rest for too long, right? We need to like actually get back out there at some point. And rest is beautiful here. Interesting. So Five of Pentacles, this is such a Wait, Five of Swords, not Five of Pentacles. What am I saying? It's because of all her jewels. She made me think of Five of Pentacles. That's so funny. Anyway, let me get back on track here. Arrogance for sure for the Five of Swords. We've got that bully energy. Mind you, I love the message of this card. You know, the bamboo compares itself to the oak and asks itself why it isn't stronger. The oak compares itself to the bamboo and asks itself why it's not more flexible. And so they're like at odds with each other because they're not recognizing their own gifts. It's just really interesting. Anyway, I think this definitely ties into the Five of Swords, but I'm so interested about this image that I kind of want to, like the keyword works, but I'm like, what is happening in this image? So let's see what she says about it. Arrogance is most often a defensive ploy to avoid being seen as weak ordinary, insignificant. That really gives a new perspective on this guy, doesn't it? The bluster and posing is an effort to direct attention away from a deep-seated wound of unworthiness and unlovability. The egoist's drive for dominance manifests as an impatient disregard for those they see as beneath them. Always on the defensive, they are constantly on the lookout for enemies they fear could threaten their power or diminish their stature. Maintaining such an image demands a staunch belief in their superiority. I'm just wondering if she mentions here about this image. Seek out the vulnerability buried within. Huh. She doesn't really, like, I'd be curious what, if you're watching this video, I would love to hear your thought on this image. From what I can see, there's this, it looks like graffiti been painted on a wall in this image of this person, right? Could it be that the graffiti artist is like making fun of this person, and then this is like they're being shitty, like they're like the Five of Swords guy? Like, I feel like I'm missing the point of the image. I do wish that she'd explained why the images were what they were. That's always a really valuable bit in guidebooks, so I do wish it was here. But anyway, Five of Swords. Arrogance works though, for sure. Oops, there we go. Okay, now we have the Six of Swords. Again, we see a really shadowy side of bringing all of our baggage with us and being burdened as a result, which is one of the things I think about when I look at the Six of Swords. Here we have departure, which funny enough is my keyword typically for one of my keywords for the Eight of Cups. But I think it does make sense. We're getting away from a situation. Here, this tree has fallen. This little bird has a little teeny green leaf and is gonna leave, right? So really powerful images, all of them. I love that we get a nod back to the Devil card in the Osho Zen in this card. That is, it's very similar, obviously. So just to remind you, the Devil card in the Osho Zen was conditioning. Oh, I gotta go this way. There it is. And it's a lion wearing sheep's clothing. In this case, it's because society has made this lion believe that it's a lamb, even though it's a lion. That's the sort of message of that card. But here in Deception, right, we have a wolf in sheep's clothing. So it's different. It's not meant to be the same meaning, but it just kind of cracks me up. The whole wolf in sheep's clothing is such a immediate, visceral analogy that I think we can reach into for the Seven of Swords for sure. Here it talks about people wearing masks, pretending to be something else to be more palatable, and the way that that can be so manipulative. And the keyword is politics. I like Deception much better. Okay. Oof, these are all so good. Okay, so the Eight of Swords, we're getting kind of caught up in our own mind. Here we're being sort of trapped by guilt. Here we're being trapped by blame, perhaps blaming others or blaming ourselves. So powerful for the Eight of Swords for sure. Fear is a powerful keyword for sure for the Nine of Swords. And I think it's actually much more on point with the meaning of this card in the traditional RWS by far than sorrow is. This is again about allowing yourself time to feel and process, and it's a powerful card, but it's more emotional in nature just by its keyword and its imagery than it is in this place of fear. So I really like all of these, but I love that. Okay, now we have grief for the Ten of Swords. Again, it takes us to an emotional place, and I actually really, of these three, prefer the Osho Zen, because even though it's like we have this opportunity now to rise above this difficult, painful experience, to accept that whatever it is over, and to evolve and learn. Here, it's just about grief, which is, for me, a much better keyword for the Five of Cups, but it is really powerful. Again, I'm just going to see what she says. Like, is she still keeping us in the realm of the mind? Because a lot of the sword suit for her feels more emotional. The silence of loss can be devastating and can thrust one into a world outside of time. As the floodgates of grief spill over, a disorienting tidal surge sweeps through, leaving nothing to cling to. For the one who grieves, the past is gone and the future appears to hold no promise. It's a profound letting go into the vastness of an empty now. Some may want to shrug off the fog of sorrow, call it a bad dream, fill the vacuum with doing. But those denials rob the heart of experiencing and expressing the void. The vulnerability of grief is to be respected, not suppressed out of unpleasantness or shame. Grief takes its own time. So really, she's just speaking to grief. I mean, yes, there is grief in the Ten of Swords for 100%. There's no denying it, but it does take us to more of an emotional place than a mental one here, which is interesting. Okay. Now we have the Page of Swords. So again, really shadowy here. It talks to getting, caught up in the mind. It doesn't feel very Page of Swordsy to me. Scrutiny, though, feels very Page of Swordsy. So I love that keyword and that image. Okay. Fighting. Again, very shadowy, very taking the more negative approach. Love determination as a keyword for the Knight of Swords. So really like that. Queen of Swords, perfection. Yes, absolutely. She's very exacting. She's very precise. That really makes sense to me. Much easier and better than morality. Yeah, the court cards of the air suit and the Osho Zen really got a bad rap for good reason. And here we have very similar concepts. I mean, that's like, wow. Really, really poignant image. Power, control, and the King of Swords. I love power because it can be wielded both directions. I like that much better than control. All right, and that brings us to the earthly suit. Now we have roots. I love roots as a keyword for the Ace of Pentacles. I think that's awesome. Way easier to interpret than maturity. Be here now, great message. And it's the same message that's being told in moment to moment. It's just told in a more clear, concise way. Love that. Cooperation is great. This also reminds me of, which card is it? The Four of Wands? I think it's the Four of Wands. It's called, I think it's also called cooperation. Maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. Maybe it's called participation. Yeah, it's called participation. So this is very similar to this vibe for me and much more appropriate in this spot. So I really like that. I like that everybody's got their hands in. I like that we see different types of hands, young hands, older hand, or maybe these are all, they all look kind of young actually, which is really interesting. Love that. Way more on point with the Three of Pentacles and the RWS than guidance. I think that consuming is more neutral of a keyword in general than the miser, but it's kind of funny because this leans into withholding or holding all of your resources, whereas consuming, I guess you're also gathering and holding. That makes sense. So interesting take, more pleasant to look at for sure than the miser. Here we have the Outsider. This is such a beautiful card. It really does speak to the Five of Pentacles, but more of, I think, the social experience of the Five of Pentacles can be really, really powerful in a reading. But here we have perseverance. We have this sweet little bird persevering in spite of the winter storm. Love that. Generosity is such a great keyword, but so is compromise. I feel like when it comes to the actual meaning of the the Six of Pentacles, excuse me, and the way that I think about it, I think this does a better job though. Patience, timing, and the Seven. These are all beautiful. Love timing. Love, 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 love that for this card. Labor of love, yes. Ordinariness, again, it can be a little bit more obscure. When you read the book, it makes tons of sense, but you have to build that relationship, whereas here it's like on its face, you know what it's talking about. I love ripeness so much. It's such a beautiful message to get in a reading. It's very useful as a message. Satisfaction, I'm not a big fan of this image. Some of the artwork in this does throw me a little. It doesn't feel as beautiful, and I don't know how else to say that. This has a quality to it that I really love, and it's missing in this one, but that's okay. This has got more of like a kind of like a digital collage kind of feel, but that's okay. Satisfaction is great for the Nine of Pentacles. That was a keyword. Love the keyword privilege for the Ten of Pentacles a lot. Like a lot. I love that. And I think this is way more readable than We Are the World, which is a little ambiguous again. Osho Zen does do that in a few places, as you've probably noticed. Okay, Page of Earth. This feels very Page of Fire to me. It throws me when I think of this as an earthly card because I read it the way I would read like the Page or Knight of Fire. Not so much the Page of Earth, because the Page of Earth to me is not very adventurous. They're very resourceful, honest for sure. They're a good egg. Maybe that's how I'll think of that. But I'm not sure about this honesty in the eggs. I feel like that's, I don't know. That image feels a little hasty to me. And then love the keyword explore for the Knight of Pentacles, but this will be my forever favorite Knight of Pentacles forever and ever because I love the keyword slowing down. I like the reminder that sometimes you're the tortoise and not the hare. I love, love, love this image, but explore is really good too. Support for the Queen of Pentacles is amazing. And again, this feels more like the Queen of Fire. I feel like the Queen of Fire in the Osho Zen should have been swapped with the Queen of Earth. Look at this. Doesn't this feel like, okay, forgive the color, taking the color out of the equation for a second, she's serving food. This feels like the Queen of Pentacles. And this idea of like spreading her seed and like flowering and being really passionate and like loosey-goosey, this feels like the Queen of Fire to me, frankly. But, you know, it is what it is. There's a few places that the Osho Zen does that, and I'm like, why? Why though? And then we have respect and abundance. These all feel very King of Pentacles-y to me. I like the imagery. I love that we have this old man with this sweet little bird, this vulnerable bird. There's a connection to nature, a respect for nature, and the idea that he's earned respect in this context, right? He's gone through life, he's gained wisdom, he's gained experience. So I like that. Okay. So that takes us through all the cards. Let me zoom back out. All right. Let's talk about production stuff real quick. and the quality of the cards. So I'll take the Rider-Waite-Smith out of that, out of the equation for this, because this is on gorgeous cardstock and there's no comparing. But the Sacred She, when I got it, I have to admit the cardstock felt disappointing. Even the quality of the paper in the book felt disappointing. So I'll see if I can illustrate the idea. This, I don't know if you can hear it. It has like a little bit of heft to it in the book. This book feels, by nature, even if I just try to show how like floppy it is, this is really like I could fold the entire thing in half. It's a very, very floppy, thin paper. This has got some stability and structure to it. The paper in here is very thin, right? It's very thin. So it's readable, but it actually does even ghost. You can see, if I hold this up, you can see the image behind, right? It's quite thin. It's quite thin. So you can see where the production quality, like papers are like less in the Sacred She. The cardstock is also very like papery feeling, and there is a bit of a slap to the shuffle. It's not too bad. It's not as bad as like the Boo Tarot. Sorry to use that as an experience, as a comparison, but that deck's very slappy. This has got a little bit of that slappiness. And it is going to warp for sure over time. Like just, it's not going to hold up well, I think, to lots of shuffling. It's got a nice finish on the cardstock. Like it's got that kind of like matte lamination feeling to it, but it's thin. It has already gotten a slight bow in it, and my copy is really new. But the biggest issue I have with it is just that it feels a little bit floppy. If you have this is probably actually a good example, so I'm going to show it. The Mystic Palette Tarot. I think these feel kind of the same. Yeah, these feel kind of the same. So this has also got that feeling, that kind of slappy, kind of floppy. Yeah, these feel very the same. They don't have a lot of snap to them, and this is a bigger deck, so it feels, I mean, this one might actually be, actually we can check because they'll have the same number of cards. The Mystic Palette, yeah, the Mystic Palette is actually a little thicker, you can see, right? We've probably got like that. Yeah, there's a definite cardstock thickness issue. So this is a little bit thinner than this. This has got a little more structure. But I would say they shuffle very similarly because these cards are bigger, so they're going to have more give. But they're similar. They're similar for sure in the type of cardstock that they are. So that can give you an idea. All right, so the Osho Zen Tarot Pocket, though, has a classic kind of, like, I'll show you here. See how much it moves? I'm holding it. Let me hold it at the very top here, actually. Versus holding this. Now, this is a smaller card, so it's going to be more sturdy, but it moves more as like a unit like this rather than like bending. It kind of moves as like a unit. So this has a little bit more snap, but again, it's also smaller, and smaller cards do have more snap. Yeah, this has got structure to it, so it feels more sturdy. It's not bowed yet. Yeah, so I don't think this is a deck that's going to hold up very well, which is a shame. Let's do a little energy obstacle advice before I close out this video. I don't know if we're shuffled enough. Let me shuffle some more. Okay. That should be good. All right, let's do energy obstacle advice. So the energy, this will just be a collective reading. The energy is power. How are we using it? How are we wielding power? Are we being responsible with our use of power? Are we being careless with our use of power? That's sort of the energy. It's like a question about power. The obstacle is understanding. This is about like really making sure that you're expressing your ideas and communicating from a place of truth, but also truth really from your gut. Like, is this the right moment? Is this how I should be expressing myself? And we may be struggling a bit to express ideas that are really coming through our gut. That might be difficult to express. And then the advice is union. How can we meet others with compassion and on an equal playing field without wielding power intentionally or unintentionally over them, or surrendering unintentionally or intentionally to them? Does that make sense? So what's our relationship right now with power, understanding, and union? So I think it's going to be a readable deck. I'm on the fence because I loved a lot of these cards. I really did. But at the same time, I feel like it may just compete too much with the energy of my Osho Zen. It may not, I mean, like the entries in the guidebook were absolutely beautiful, but it's got a big ask, right? The Tao Oracle by Mahadeva is so powerful and so beautiful, and I love the artwork in that. The artwork in this is not my favorite. There's something very too digital about it. And it just kind of throws me when I'm looking at the cards. Like this, it's overly soft. Maybe it was a new medium. It feels like Procreate and collage kind of combined. Like this feels more like her actual artwork. Like when you look at this card, art style wise, next to this one, they look like they came from two different artists. It doesn't feel cohesive. And this is actually the image that was on the box. And if you look at the artwork that's on the cover of the book even, it doesn't have this like soft, smushy quality. And so if I think of this as an example, and then here we really do have some very clear collaging. And I'm just thinking like here again, this has got that sort of digital, soft, airbrushy look. But then this almost looks like, this looks like a photograph. This looks like more like Mahadeva Padma's artwork. What I think of as her artwork. This doesn't. This, clearly a photo that's been manipulated. Right? Like it's kind of all over the place. And I don't know how to interpret it that way. Visually, so these cards, just like this doesn't look like they came from the same artist. So I've got an issue with the cohesion in the artwork, but overall, as far as the quality of the deck and the meaning and the guidebook, I think it's really beautifully done. I think that the artwork is going to be a little too distracting for me to want to put in the time and the energy to bond with it. Like I hate this image. It's way too smushy. I don't like it. It's kind of got an uncanny feeling to it. It makes me feel uncomfortable to look at. And if they all had the same quality, again, this looks more like her original artwork. So does this. So does that even. But so many of these cards just like, look, even just the way these hands are done. These hands, I mean, they're probably, I mean, I can't draw hands that good, so I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that like, it feels kind of weird and not real. Same thing here. Very too blurry. There's a softness to it. This feels like Mahadeva Padma's artwork as I understood it. So does that. But a lot of these don't. That does. That does. So it's like, I think there's an experimentation with different types of art in here. And the result is I get almost the vibe of like this being a collab deck, even though it's not collab. And that is unfortunate because that usually means I'm not going to end up working with the deck long term. So now having spent all of this time with it, I think my final verdict on this deck is probably that, unfortunately, this is kind of like a really, really exhaustive this or that. There was never any chance I was going to let go of the Osho Zen, but I was wondering if this could hold its own next to the Tao Oracle. In fact, let me grab the Tao Oracle. We're already here for an hour and a half. Let's just keep it going. This deck came out not long after the Osho Zen and features Mahadeva Padma's artwork. And I hope you can see, like, let me just flip this over so you can really, let me pull up like one of these cards that has this like squishy, soft art style. Okay. And then you see it next to this artwork. And you're like, wait, this is so much more, like there's a little hint of softness here. This isn't 100% cohesive, but it all has the same sort of quality to the artwork for the most part. See, maybe this is just the nature of her work. Maybe she just does have so many different styles. And maybe I just got used to it with the Tao Oracle. That's soft. So yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm like, maybe it's not a fair thing to say. But I think that most of these have that more detailed style to them. And only a few that are soft in that squishy, soft way. And if I look at the Osho Zen, we see the same thing, right? That's a little bit soft, much more crisp and detailed. But for the most part, I feel like I'm in the same art style in here, even though the actual composition of the images varies a lot. And maybe it's just that I've had so many years with this so that I'm just used to it, frankly. Because that's soft. I don't know. What do you think? Especially if you are a big fan of the Osho Zen and or the Tao Oracle, which are her older decks. I've had both of these for years and used them for years and loved them for years. So maybe it was just an unfair fight, you know? But I think I'm probably going to end up letting this one go. I don't, as beautiful as it is and as much as I love a lot of the images, and it was a joy to really go through it and spend some time with it with you all, I don't think it's one I'm going to reach for. So I think I'm probably going to say goodbye to this one. But I'm really glad I spent the time with it and got to share it with you all. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. I really, really appreciate it. As always, an extra big thank you goes out to my Unicorn Fam channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And to all of you watching, subscribing, commenting, doing all of the things, I appreciate you so, so much. Until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.